My golden child brother got everything. Ivy League tuition, a BMW at 17, and Dad's business card at 21. At a family barbecue, he overheard me mention my third property, and he exploded. He threw his drink. Mom started crying, and then Grandpa laughed and said something that shut the whole table up. I, 29, male, am an HVAC technician and real estate investor, and I recently finalized the destruction of my entitled brother's life after he tried to steal mine. If you grew up with a golden child sibling, you already know the dynamic. They are the main character, the genius, the future of the family. You are just the background extra. But what happens when the background extra quietly buys the whole theater? I am going to tell you exactly how that plays out. My brother is 3 years younger than me. From the moment he learned to walk, my parents treated him like he was the second coming. He was loud, charismatic, and good at taking tests. I was the opposite. I liked working with my hands, fixing things, and staying out of the way. I struggled in a traditional classroom, which in my parents' eyes meant I was a lost cause. The difference in how we were treated became glaringly obvious when we hit high school. When my brother turned 17, my parents took him to a dealership and co-signed a brand new BMW 3 Series for him. They paid the down payment and covered the insurance, claiming he needed a safe, reliable vehicle for his upcoming college tours. When I was 17, my father handed me the keys to a rusting 15-year-old Honda Civic with a broken passenger window. He told me I could have it if I took over the insurance, and paid him $500 for the title. My brother got a fully funded ride to an out-of-state Ivy League university. They paid his tuition, his room and board, and gave him a generous monthly allowance, so he wouldn't have to stress over a part-time job. I went to a local trade school for plumbing and HVAC. On the day I got my certification, my father shook my hand, handed me a generic greeting card with a $50 bill inside, and informed me that it was time to start paying rent if I planned to keep sleeping in my childhood bedroom. I packed my bags and moved out 2 days later. I didn't complain. In fact, getting out of that house and into the trades was the best thing that ever happened to me. By the time I was 22, I was working 60-hour weeks. I took every emergency weekend call, every holiday shift, and I saved every single dime. While my brother was posting photos online from fraternity formals and spring break trips to Cabo, I was crawling through rat-infested crawl spaces, fixing ductwork, and spending my evenings reading up on residential real estate investing. At 23, I bought a rundown duplex on the outskirts of the city. It was foreclosure, it smelled like wet garbage, and it had a foundation crack that I spent 3 agonizing months repairing myself. I lived in one unit and rented out the other. The rental income covered the entire mortgage. 2 years later, I leveraged the equity in that duplex and bought a solid brick fourplex. I kept my head down. I drove a heavily used Ford F-150, wore dirty work boots, and let my family go on believing I was just barely scraping by. Meanwhile, my brother graduated with a degree in finance. My father immediately hired him as a junior executive at his boutique wealth management firm. At 21, my brother was handed a corner office, a corporate credit card, and a salary that he made sure to brag about at every single holiday dinner. He was insufferable. He wore custom-tailored suits, constantly flashed his expensive watches, and treated service workers like they were invisible. My parents absolutely ate it up. They told anyone who would listen about their brilliant, wealthy son. Whenever my name came up in conversation, my mother would usually sigh, wave her hand dismissively, and say that I was still doing my little repair jobs, but that it was honest work at least. I let them talk. Silence is an incredible asset when you're building real wealth. The mask finally slipped at our annual 4th of July family barbecue. The party was held at my parents' house, a sprawling, pretentious property with a massive pool and a perfectly manicured lawn. The entire extended family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and my grandfather. Grandpa is a hardened, old-school businessman. He actually founded the wealth management firm my father now runs. Grandpa came from absolutely nothing, built a financial empire, and stepped back from the day-to-day operations in his late 70s. He rarely speaks at these family gatherings. He usually just sits in his wheelchair on the patio, smoking a cigar he definitely isn't supposed to have, just watching everyone. I was standing near the edge of the patio, holding a plastic cup of water, talking to my uncle. My uncle is a general contractor, and we usually swap stories about dealing with local zoning boards and permit delays. He asked me how the HVAC business was treating me. I kept my voice low. I told him the business was good, but that I had actually just closed on a 12-unit multifamily building over in the West District. I explained that I was going to do a full gut rehab on 4 of the units and stabilize the rest, and that it was my third property, so the cash flow was getting really nice. I had no idea my brother was standing directly behind me. He stepped into my line of sight, his face turning a blotchy, angry red. He had a margarita in his hand and was wearing pristine white linen pants. He asked me what I had just said. I told him I was just catching up with our uncle. He stepped closer, shaking his head. He told me he heard exactly what I said and demanded to know why I was lying about buying a 12-unit building. He told me I fixed air conditioners and didn't have the capital for commercial real estate. The music from the outdoor speakers seemed to fade out. A few relatives nearby stopped talking and turned to look at us. I kept my voice completely even. I told him I save my money and I invest it, and that it isn't a secret, just not something I bother bringing up at dinners. He let out this loud, theatrical scoff. He looked around to make sure people were watching. He told me I expected him to believe I owned 3 properties when I drove a truck that belonged in a scrapyard and wore boots with holes in them. I told him the truck runs fine. The boots are comfortable, and I don't need to wear my net worth to feel good about myself. That was the absolute wrong thing to say to a narcissist. The veins in his neck literally popped. His entire sense of superiority was built on being the rich, successful sibling. The mere suggestion that the blue-collar brother was outperforming him sent him into a complete tailspin. He started yelling. He called me a liar. He told the whole yard I was making things up to look good in front of the family, that I was a glorified janitor, and that I didn't know the first thing about leverage or cap rates. My father hurried over, holding his hands up, trying to calm the situation down. He asked what was going on. My brother pointed a finger aggressively at my chest and told our father I was standing there lying to our uncle, claiming I owned a commercial apartment building. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just pulled my phone out of my pocket, opened my secure property management portal, and handed the phone to my father. My father looked at the screen. He saw the LLC name. He saw the active rent rolls. He saw the addresses of the duplex, the fourplex, and the brand new 12-unit building, along with the total asset valuation. All the color drained out of my father's face. He looked from the phone to me, his mouth opening and closing without any sound coming out. My brother snatched the phone right out of my father's hand. He stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. I watched his eyes scan the numbers. The reality hit him like a freight train. I had serious equity. I had massive passive income. I was completely financially independent from them. He lost his mind. He threw his drink at me. The heavy glass shattered against a brick pillar right behind my head, splashing sticky margarita mix and tequila all over my shoulder and the side of my face. My mother shrieked. She rushed over, completely ignoring me, and put her hands on my brother's shoulders, asking if he was okay and coddling him like a toddler. I just stood there. I wiped the lime juice off my cheek with the back of my hand. I had expected some kind of tantrum, but the physical violence was a new low. Before my father could even utter an apology, a raspy, booming voice cut straight through the heavy silence of the backyard. Grandpa was leaning forward in his wheelchair. He pointed his cigar straight at my brother. He told everyone that my brother threw the drink because he was broke. My father stammered, asking Grandpa what he was talking about. Grandpa let out a dry, rasping laugh. He told my father not to play dumb. He revealed that he still reviewed the firm's quarterly reports. He exposed that my brother had been taking massive advance draws against his salary for over a year. He announced to the entire family that my brother was leveraged his eyeballs on terrible crypto investments, was drowning in margin calls, and was currently 2 months behind on the lease payments for his Porsche. Grandpa pointed a crooked finger directly at me. He told the family that I owned the dirt they were standing on. He said I owned bricks and roofs. Then he pointed back to my brother and said he was just playing dress up with the company's money. The silence that followed was suffocating. You could hear the water sloshing in the pool. My brother looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. He shoved our mother's hands off him, turned around, and practically sprinted into the house. My father gave me a look of pure, unadulterated venom, as if I had somehow orchestrated this entire humiliation, and he chased after his golden boy. I wiped the last of the sticky drink off my shirt, nodded to my uncle, walked out the front gate, and drove home. That really should have been the end of the story. It should have been a wake-up call my family needed to realize their golden child was a complete fraud. But entitlement is a sickness, and enablers would do absolutely anything to protect the false reality they have constructed. 2 weeks later, the real insanity started. I was at a job site when I received a frantic phone call from my mother. She was crying hysterically. She begged me to come to the house immediately, claiming it was a life-or-death family emergency. Against my better judgment, I drove over. When I walked into the dining room, my parents and my brother were sitting at the large oak table. The atmosphere was incredibly tense. My father took the lead. He used his best authoritative executive voice to explain that my brother had made some highly aggressive investments that had temporarily gone sideways. He admitted that my brother had used firm capital, without authorization, to cover a massive margin call. It was a textbook case of embezzlement. My father explained that the firm's major internal audit was scheduled in exactly 30 days. If the missing funds weren't replaced by then, the compliance officers would have no choice but to report the discrepancy. My brother would face federal wire fraud and embezzlement charges. The amount he had stolen was $450,000. My father refused to look me in the eye. He said they were liquidating some personal stock portfolios, but they could only come up with about $200,000 without triggering major tax penalties and alerting Grandpa to the cover-up. They needed the rest of the money immediately. I just stared at them. I asked what any of this had to do with me. My brother finally spoke up. All the arrogance from the barbecue was gone. He looked cornered and desperate. He told me he knew I had massive equity. He said he saw the rent rolls on my phone and knew my fourplex was completely paid off. He demanded that I do a cash-out refinance on my building, pull out $250,000, and give it to him. He promised he would pay the monthly mortgage on the new loan, calling it a simple bridge loan between family members. I actually had to pause and take a deep breath. The sheer, blinding audacity of the request was difficult to process. I looked right at him. I laid the facts out clearly. I pointed out that he had committed a massive felony. He had stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from our grandfather's company, and his brilliant solution was for me to mortgage a property I had built with my own hands, put $250,000 of debt in my own name, and trust him, a proven thief, to pay me back. My mother slammed her hand on the table. She started screaming at me. She yelled that he was my brother, that family helps family, and that since I had more than enough money, I owed him this favor. I stood up from the table. I told him I owed him absolutely nothing. I refused to risk my livelihood and my financial security to cover up his crimes. I advised him to tell the compliance officer the truth and hire a good defense attorney, because I wasn't signing a single piece of paper. I walked out the front door. For the next 48 hours, my phone was bombarded with vicious text messages from my parents. They called me selfish, said I was dead to them, and accused me of destroying the family over greed. I blocked their numbers and went back to work. I figured they would eventually realize I wasn't going to budge and would find another way to bail them out. I drastically underestimated how far they were willing to go. About 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the cab of my truck eating lunch when an email notification popped up on my phone. It was an automated alert from the county clerk's office. A few years prior, when title fraud started becoming a major issue in the real estate world, I had signed up for a free county monitoring service. It sends you an email the second any document is recorded against a parcel number you own. The alert was for my fully paid-off fourplex. I opened the attached PDF document. My blood ran completely cold. It was a quitclaim deed. The legal document officially transferred the title of my fourplex from my LLC into a brand new entity, a holding company that I did not recognize. But I recognized the registered agent address for the new company. It was my brother's apartment. I zoomed in on the signature line. There, written in blue ink, was my signature. It was a very convincing forgery. He had likely traced it from an old tax document or a birthday card I had left at my parents' house years ago. Right below my forged signature was a thick, official notary stamp. I stared at the notary's name. It took me a minute, but I finally placed it. It was one of my brother's old fraternity brothers, a guy who worked at a shady title loan and check cashing place across town. A heavy knot formed in my stomach as the reality of his plan clicked into place. You do not forge a property deed just to hold on to it. You forge a deed so you can use the asset. He was using my stolen fourplex as collateral to secure a hard money loan to cover his embezzlement. Hard money lenders in the commercial real estate space move incredibly fast. They don't care about the borrower's personal credit score or debt-to-income ratio. They only care about the hard asset value. If he defaulted on the loan, which he absolutely would, the private lender would foreclose on my building. He was literally trying to steal my life's work to save his own skin. I didn't call my parents. I didn't try to confront him. I started my truck, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove directly to the most aggressive real estate litigation firm I could find downtown. I paid a hefty retainer up front and sat down in a polished conference room with a senior partner named Davis. I slid my phone across the table and showed him the deed alert. Davis reviewed the document carefully. He explained the legal reality to me. He said that in our state, a forged deed is technically void from the start, meaning it has no legal effect. However, he warned me that if my brother managed to secure a mortgage against the property before we filed a quiet title action, untangling the mess with a third-party lender would take years and cost a fortune in legal fees. We had to move immediately. Davis drafted a lease pendens right there in the office. A lease pendens is a formal notice of pending legal action involving real estate. We sent a courier to rush it to the county courthouse to be recorded against the property's parcel number. This acts as a massive, glaring red flag. Any title company running a mandatory search for a lender before wiring funds would see the lease pendens and instantly freeze the loan process. Our next stop was the local police precinct. We sat down in a cramped office with a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit. I handed over the recorded forged deed, the extensive LLC documents proving I was the sole owner of the property, and the name of a fraternity brother who had notarized a fake signature. The detective typed the notary's name into his database. He raised an eyebrow and looked at us. He casually mentioned that the specific notary was already under active investigation by the state for rubber stamping fraudulent car titles for a local chop shop ring. The detective laid out the charges. He explained that filing a forged instrument affecting real property is a serious felony. Identity theft is another felony. He added that if my brother was actively using this forged document to secure a commercial loan across state lines, the charges would immediately escalate to federal wire fraud. He asked me if I was sure I wanted to proceed, warning me that once the gears of the criminal justice system started turning, I wouldn't be able to just drop the charges if I felt bad for my family later. I looked the detective dead in the eye. I told him I wanted to press full charges. No family courtesy, no warnings. The detective nodded. He said his team would immediately subpoena the county clerk's security camera footage to see exactly who physically dropped off the fraudulent deed. He also mentioned they were going to pay a very unannounced visit to the notary that evening. I went home and went to sleep. I needed my brother to dig his hole so deep that he could never climb out of it. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was my brother. He sounded completely panicked. He left a rambling message demanding that I call him back immediately. He said he was trying to finalize a major business loan, and the underwriter had just informed him there was a legal hold placed on the fourplex. He demanded to know if I had done something, and told me I needed to call the county and remove the block that exact day, or he was going to lose his funding. The trap had officially snapped shut. He had tried to close the fraudulent loan. The title company had found my lease pendens during their final check, and they had stopped the wire transfer. I sent a text message to the unknown number. I kept it brief. I told him I had no idea what he was talking about because I was busy working on a job site. I added that if he wanted to discuss property matters, he could meet me at my lawyer's office the next morning at 10 o'clock sharp. I included the address. I knew he would show up. He was a desperate man backed into a corner, and he still genuinely believed he could bully or manipulate me into dropping the legal hold. He thought I was just throwing a tantrum. The next morning, I sat in the large conference room at Davis's law firm. Davis sat calmly next to me, organizing some files. At exactly 10 o'clock, the receptionist opened the glass doors and escorted my brother and my father into the room. My brother looked completely destroyed. He had dark, heavy circles under his eyes. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and he was visibly sweating. My father walked in with his chest puffed out, clearly brought along to act as a heavy muscle to intimidate me. My father didn't even acknowledge my lawyer. He sat down heavily in a leather chair and told me to drop the games. He demanded that I remove whatever block I had put on the property immediately. He claimed my brother was just trying to fix his mistake, that he had managed to secure a private loan, and that my petty interference was stalling the wire transfer that would save the family. Davis leaned forward and steepled his fingers. He looked at my father with the cold, detached amusement that only a seasoned litigator possesses. Davis spoke in a smooth, quiet voice. He told my father they needed to clarify the situation. He stated that my brother did not secure a private loan. Instead, my brother had attempted to defraud a private lender by pledging an asset he did not legally own. Davis casually added that to facilitate the scheme, my brother had committed identity theft, forgery, and the filing of a false instrument. All the blood rushed out of my brother's face. He defensively crossed his arms and stammered out a denial. He claimed he didn't forge anything, insisting he had a legally binding quitclaim deed that I had signed over to him to help the family. Davis didn't argue. He just slid a thick manila folder across the heavy mahogany table. Davis explained exactly what was inside the folder. He told them it contained a sworn, signed affidavit from the notary public my brother had used. Davis revealed that the police had paid the fraternity brother a visit the previous evening. Facing the immediate loss of his notary license and severe prison time for his other illegal activities, the kid had folded in about 5 minutes. He gave a full confession, stating that my brother had brought him a pre-signed document and paid him $500 in cash to stamp it without the signatory present. My brother stared at the manila folder sitting in front of him. He didn't reach for it. He didn't move. His hands started to shake uncontrollably. Davis wasn't finished. His voice remained completely devoid of emotion as he informed them that the folder also contained a copy of the official police report. A formal criminal complaint had been filed. Davis looked right at my brother and told him that the lead detective had called our office that very morning to confirm that an arrest warrant for felony forgery and identity theft was currently being processed by the district attorney's office. My father practically jumped out of his chair. He slammed his hands on the table and glared at me. He yelled, asking if I had actually called the police on my own flesh and blood. He started calling me a vindictive, jealous loser. I cut him off. My voice was loud enough to echo in the room. I leaned across the table and looked my father right in the eyes. I told him he did not get to play the moral high ground. I pointed at my brother and laid it out. I said he tried to steal a building that took me years of literal blood, sweat, and physical labor to buy. He tried to ruin my financial future and destroy my credit to cover up the fact that he was actively stealing from our grandfather. And worst of all, my father knew exactly what was happening and actively enabled it. Panic finally set in. My father's authoritative facade crumbled completely. His voice dropped an octave, and he started pleading. He promised we could fix it. He said they would transfer the deed back to my LLC that very afternoon. He promised they would find the missing money some other way. He begged me to just call the police, withdraw the complaint, and tell him it was all a big misunderstanding or a clerical error. Davis interjected. Shaking his head, he explained to my father that this was no longer a civil dispute between family members. It was a severe criminal offense. The state was pressing the charges now, not me. Davis coldly informed him that you cannot unring a bell, especially when the district attorney has a signed confession from the corrupt notary and security footage of my brother filing the forged deed. Davis also added that, on top of the criminal charges, my LLC was officially filing a massive civil suit against my brother for slander of title and intentional infliction of emotional distress. My brother slowly put his head in his hands. A quiet, pathetic, hyperventilating sob escaped his throat. The golden child was finally, for the first time in his entirely sheltered life, facing a consequence that he couldn't charm, manipulate, or buy his way out of. I stood up, looked at both of them, and told them to get out of the office. My father looked at me. I could see the exact moment he realized that in my 29 years of life, he had absolutely zero power or leverage over me. He grabbed my brother by the arm, hauled him out of the chair, and pulled him out of the conference room. The fallout was swift, brutal, and incredibly public. 2 days after that meeting, the arrest warrant was formally executed. The police did not call my brother and afford him the quiet dignity of turning himself in at the station. They showed up at the boutique wealth management firm in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. They arrested him right at his desk. They marched him out to the main lobby in handcuffs, parading him past the receptionists, the wealthy clients, and the junior analysts he used to terrorize on a daily basis. The arrest made the local business blotter in the newspaper the following morning. That article was the spark that ignited the final powder keg. Grandpa saw the news. Grandpa did not call my father to ask for an explanation or to offer help. Grandpa operated on a different level. He immediately called his outside independent auditing firm and a team of ruthless corporate attorneys. They descended on the wealth management firm like a plague of locusts. Within 48 hours, the forensic auditors found a missing $450,000. But they didn't stop there. They dug deeper and found years of gross negligence and mismanagement. They discovered that my father had been actively covering up my brother's bad trades for years. To hide the losses from Grandpa, my father had been quietly dipping into client reserve accounts to float the margins and deliberately falsifying quarterly reports. Grandpa called an immediate emergency meeting of the board of directors. As the overwhelming majority shareholder, he had absolute, unquestionable authority over the company. He fired my father for cause on the spot. Because it was for cause, he stripped my father of his massive executive severance package and forced a buyout of his remaining equity in the firm at a fraction of the value. He then had security permanently banned both my father and my brother from entering the premises ever again. The legal timeline for my brother's crimes moved at its own slow, grinding, agonizing pace. The justice system is not quick. Over the next 18 months, my brother's life was completely consumed by court dates, pre-trial hearings, and mounting legal bills. The grand jury formally indicted him on 3 separate felony counts because it was his first criminal offense and because he managed to scrape together a high-priced, aggressive defense attorney using the absolute last of my parents' liquid retirement cash. He narrowly avoided a long stint in state prison. After a year and a half of fighting, he finally broke down and took a plea deal. He pled guilty to a lesser felony charge of attempted real estate fraud. The judge did not go easy on him. He received 5 years of heavily supervised probation, 500 hours of grueling manual community service, and a massive restitution order to cover the county's investigative costs. Because he is now a convicted felon, his life as he knew it is over. He lost his securities licenses. He can never legally work in the finance sector ever again. No bank or corporate firm will even look at his resume. My parents' lives imploded right alongside his. They had to quickly sell their sprawling, pretentious house just to cover the exorbitant legal defense fees and to quietly pay back the client reserve funds my father had mismanaged, which narrowly kept my father from facing his own criminal embezzlement charges. They moved into a cramped, outdated 2-bedroom apartment in a dreary suburb 30 miles outside the city. My father, once a respected executive, is currently trying to find basic work as a mid-level accountant, but his professional reputation in the city is completely and utterly destroyed. No one will touch him. My brother currently works at a massive chain tire shop. He spends his days changing brake pads and rotating tires. He drives the rusted Honda Civic I used to own. I appreciate the deep, poetic irony of that every single day. I haven't spoken a single word to any of them since that morning in the lawyer's office. I instituted a strict, unbreakable no-contact rule, blocking them on every conceivable platform. I did, however, get one very unexpected visit from Grandpa. He had his driver pull his car up to one of my active job sites about 6 months after the legal dust had finally settled. I was out inspecting the new framing on the 12-unit building. His driver helped him out and Grandpa rolled his wheelchair right down the plywood ramp, completely ignoring construction dust getting all over his expensive suit. He stopped his chair, looked up at the massive brick building I was renovating, and then looked at me. He told me I did the exact right thing. His voice sounded like grinding stones. He said that a rot will spread and kill the whole tree if you don't have the stomach to cut it out. He admitted that he should have cut the rot out years ago, and that he had let sentimentality and old age blind him to what his own son was doing to the company he built from scratch. He reached into his jacket pocket and handed me a thick, sealed envelope. I opened it. It was a certified copy of his newly revised legal trust and last will. I scanned the documents. He had completely and legally disinherited my father and my brother. They were removed entirely. He had named me as the sole executor and the primary, overwhelming beneficiary of his massive estate. I folded the papers up and handed the envelope back to him. I looked at him and told him I didn't need his money, because I built my own. Grandpa let out a genuine, slightly terrifying smile. He took the envelope back and said he knew I built my own. He told me that was exactly why I was the only person in the entire bloodline he trusted to manage his empire when he was gone. He left the envelope on a stack of drywall and had his driver take him home. It's been over a year since that visit. My 12-unit building is fully leased out and generating excellent, steady returns. I'm currently under contract to purchase a commercial retail strip center on the growing side of town. I still drive my old beat-up F-150. I still wear my comfortable work boots every single day, and I still sleep perfectly soundly at night, knowing I fiercely protected what was mine. Sometimes, arrogant people confuse silence with weakness. They assume that because you aren't loud, because you aren't constantly demanding attention, and because you don't brag, you won't fight back when you get pushed. They usually find out the hard way that the quiet ones are the ones holding all the winning cards. If you enjoyed seeing karma served up colder than a broken AC unit in December, hit subscribe. I promise my next property renovation will be a lot less dramatic than tearing down and rebuilding my entire family tree.